The Switch 2 is almost here, and I invited Brian Shea from Game Informer and the All Things Nintendo podcast to talk about the Switch 2 and his time with the Switch 2. In this episode, we dig into the hardware, what Nintendo has up its sleeve, and what it means for the future of gaming. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. This episode of the Gamerheads Podcast is brought to you by Seven Bridges Premium Gourmet Yum Yum Sauce. Enhance every bite with our savory blends of flavors, perfect for meats, vegetables, and crispy treats. Whether you're dipping, drizzling, marinating, grilling, roasting, or snacking, Seven Bridges Yum Yum Sauce takes your culinary experience to the next level. Get yours today and make every meal a gourmet delight.
Hi, I'm Celia Schilling from Yacht Club Games.
Hey, this is James from Mega Cat Studios.
Hey folks, this is Matt, aka Stormageddon from Reignite and the Fun and Games podcast.
This is Stephanie from the Boss Rush Podcast and the Boss Rush Network.
Hey, this is Mark and Keon from Bonte Avond.
Hey, this is Sebastian with the ProNerdReport.com and the Single Player Experience Podcast.
Hi, this is Chris.
Mike.
And Garrett from Daylight Basement Studio.
Hey, this is Baron J67 from Level 1 Gaming.
Hi, I'm Jacob McCourt from the Left Behind Game Club, Crossplay Conversations, and Video Game Trivia.
Hey, this is Todd Mitchell from Code Right Play.
Salutations, this is Mike Carroll from Stroll Art.
Hey, this is Jeff Moonen from Fun and Games Podcast.
What's good, y'all? This is Adam from Respawn Aimfire.
Hey, this is Patrick from the Backlog Odyssey.
Hey, this is Rune from Runic Codes.
Hi, this is Andrew from Spalato Bros.
Hi, everyone. Jill Grote here from the Indie Informer.
Hello, this is the Crypt Master, and you're listening to Roger you're listening to Roger on the Gamerheads Podcast.
And welcome to another episode of the Gamerheads Podcast. My name is Roger. This week, I have a returning guest. I have Brian Shea on the show with me. He is the executive editor at Game Informer and host of All Things Nintendo podcast. Brian, thank you so much for joining me and taking time out of your schedule to talk about the Switch 2.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me back. I mean, I didn't blow it completely the first time, I guess. So I really appreciate you inviting me back to chat about, I guess, something you could consider in my wheelhouse, being that it's Nintendo. But, you know, it's an exciting time, an exciting topic, but also kind of a unpredictable topic over the last few weeks. So excited to break it all down with you.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm surprised you came back. Like, maybe you're like, I'm not going to go on that podcast again. No, but it's nice to have you back.
Hey, I almost wore my Gamerheads podcast t-shirt that you sent me.
That's true. That's true. I'm glad you got that.
I had a moment where I looked at it and I was like, maybe I wear this today on the show. And I was like, no, that's like going to see a band and wearing like the t-shirt of the band. Like, you know, that's a rule that I learned, like, I think relatively late in my life, where I would always wear the shirt of the band I was going to see. And then somebody was like, no, haven't you ever heard the phrase, don't be that guy? And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, like if you go to see a band, don't wear a shirt of the band. I'm like, come on, that's nonsense. And I looked it up and it turns out that actually is a thing. And I'm like,
really?
Now I'm really self-conscious about it. Thanks a lot, my friend who mentioned that to me. But yeah, I mean, it's fine. I think that it's a dumb rule, honestly. But
it is. I would have been okay if you would have worn it. I would have been like, oh, that's cool. I'm okay if you didn't, but I'm just saying I would have been okay with it. I wouldn't have been like, oh, that's weird. Why are you wearing a Gamerhead shirt? But I'm glad you got the shirt. First of all, I just want to say congratulations on the role of executive editor of Game Informer.
Yeah, it's incredible to be back. I mean, it didn't seem like it was ever going to be back after last August when we were shut down. I was kind of like in the mindset of like, all right, well, I guess it's time to move on and do something different with my career and all this other stuff. Like, you know, the games media space is so tumultuous along with the rest of the games industry these past few years. So it was really disheartening to kind of just be like, oh man, like, you know, is there even a spot for me in games media anymore was kind of how I was starting to feel after, you know, doing it for about 16 years. And then, you know, so I was exploring some other options. And then around September, it started feeling like Game Informer, there were talks of there was this company that was interested in maybe trying to acquire the brand and bring the staff back, and I was like, oh, that's a nice sentiment, but I don't think it's ever going to happen. Like that seems like such a long shot. And the talks kept progressing, and we kept hearing more and more from them, and they seemed super gung ho about it. So I kept keeping my eyes open for other things and like plotting other career moves, thinking like, okay, well, this, even if it is something that they're serious about, it's probably a long shot. Like, it's probably going to be something that like they're going to look at the numbers or look at like whatever and then be like, okay, yeah, let's just do something else. Because like it's so unheard of to have a brand shut down and then come back under new ownership, and not only that, but bring everybody back.
Right.
So around December, it started feeling like, okay, this kind of it's sounding like almost a certainty. And then like right before I left to go to the Game Awards, I basically got word that like this is looking pretty certain that it's going to happen. It went from like, okay, I'm giving it like a 5 to 10% chance back in September to like, this is like 95 to like 98% done.
Yeah.
And then come January and like it's basically locked in. And then February was when we all got our job offers and were able to start. So it was kind of like, dueling miracles that we got the brand back under new ownership and everything. And they've been fantastic. It's been an incredible breath of fresh air working with this company. That's and awesome. On top of that, having 100% of the staff back, including, editorial, production, designers, the programmers that work on our website, like 100% of the staff coming back. That is just, in my wildest dreams, I couldn't have said that was going to happen.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'm just curious, if you had to get a job outside of games media, what would you be doing? What would you like to do?
I mean, there's plenty of jobs that like games media could translate to. Like, there's a lot of communication skills that go into being in media. So, something, the natural fit that I think a lot of people immediately draw is like marketing or PR, because there's so much communication in games media. And then obviously your entire job is communication when you're in marketing or PR. Yeah. But, there's other things like I did some consulting freelance in the downtime with Game Informer. I consulted on a few games, played them before they were kind of like, at the point where they were sending out review codes to media. And I basically would tell them like what was good, what was bad, like forecast a score, stuff like that. I know a lot of companies have started doing internal like kind of quality analysts, basically product analysts, where they look at a product and like basically analyze it for the good and the bad, and they give that feedback directly to the developer. So stuff like that I was keeping my eyes open for. And then of course, like even stuff outside of the games industry, because like I said, it's been kind of a dire stretch of a couple of years here for the games industry. So it was like, all right, well, like what if I just do like PR for like a local company here in Minnesota, because there's a ton of Fortune 500 companies and smaller businesses located here in the Twin Cities. So I was just kind of poking around, seeing basically throwing my application out for anything that was even remotely interesting to me.
I'm glad it all worked out, because
hey, I mean, again, the best case scenario was what happened, which in 2025 is not necessarily the standard, right? Like everybody keeps coming up to me. Like I went to the Nintendo Switch 2 event to give you kind of a natural segue here. I went to the Nintendo Switch 2 event, and I got up and asked a question at kind of like this press conference that we had with the three guys that were on the Nintendo Direct, the director, producer, and I think the technical director of the Nintendo Switch 2. And, I introduced myself, Brian Shea from Game Informer, and then I asked my question, and then I sat back down, and then like afterwards, like so many people came up and like started telling me how happy they were that Game Informer is back. And,
that's awesome.
They were super excited, and they were almost like, there's good news and there's like no catch. Like there's no like negative, like monkey's paw situation going on in 2025. Like what? So that's, that I'm also still kind of in shock about it, but I'm super grateful that it happened, and I'm super excited about the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can I just say that first of all, that's awesome that you're back. I think that's so cool, and your new role too. Like I think that's awesome. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I joined Game Informer back in 2015, and
really,
I joined as an entry-level associate editor. So it's kind of cool to have like, gotten, I guess, if you count this as a promotion instead of a rehire, which, I kind of do. Let's see. I went from associate editor to digital editor to senior editor to online content director, and now online content director to executive editor. So it's been quite a journey, touching all kinds of areas of the business, being in charge of the digital magazine at one point, being in charge of kind of our Instagram for a while. Now I'm in charge of our reviews department, which is super fun. Like, I've always loved Game Informer for its reviews. So to kind of, be the person who oversees that department really is just like kind of a dream come true, and like a super, like, it has me giddy whenever I remember that I'm in charge of like Game Informer's reviews department. It's like, who put this guy in charge?
Oh, that's awesome. Like I said, I'm super ecstatic. And last time you were on the show, obviously we didn't know any news. And it's good to have some good news in this timeline. So
for sure,
that's what I'll say. Let's talk about the Nintendo Switch 2, because you had an opportunity to try it out. The first thing I will say, and this is not actually one of my questions, but this is just something that I noticed, and I actually thought this was really cool.
Well, I'm glad this isn't one of your questions, because you have a quota, a maximum that you can ask me, and then it's all over. So
okay, well,
I'll being economical and saying this isn't one of your questions, because I would hate for you to waste it.
This is not a question. This
all
is
right, hold on. Let me make note of that. This is
not a question.
Not a question. Okay, crossing that off. All right.
You don't have to charge me for this one. Please don't charge me for this one.
Sorry, I'll stop interrupting you.
No. I thought it was cool that they had the producer and the tech, the person that worked on the Switch, and I think I don't remember the other person that was on, but they're like maybe the designer. Like, they had 3 people that worked on the system. And for somebody that worked in IT, myself, I think that's really cool that they had the people that actually built the product go out there and like say, hey, this is what we have. I mean, it shows that they have some pride in what they're delivering and giving them credit for what they did. I mean, I can't tell you how many times where it's like I know I've worked on things, and then other people stand up and deliver it, and I'm like, well, I mean, that's cool that you're getting credit for something that I like helped build, but I would like to get credit for that too. So I thought that was really cool that Nintendo went that route. And I don't know if they've ever done anything like that before. Maybe they have, but it just feels like fresh, I guess.
Yes. Sorry, I'm listening to you. I am just trying to give these guys the appropriate credit, because I agree. It's nice to have some folks that are not typically, and of course, like, I love Shigeru Miyamoto and Yoshiaki Koizumi and the folks who are typically on screen, but when they're talking about the Nintendo Switch 2, it's really great. And here, I found the names of the folks here. I actually scrubbed through the direct here. So it's Koichi Kawamoto, who is the producer of Nintendo Switch 2. Okay, he's introducing himself. Then we got Takuhiro Dota, who is the director of Nintendo Switch 2. And then finally, we have Tetsuya Sasaki, who is hardware design lead.
Okay.
So those were the 3 guys that were also a part of the press conference that I was able to attend. Nice. Super cool to be able to see them. But yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with you that it was really nice to have a change of pace with like having those guys on screen, because like they were also even telling me, like, when we were sitting down and like we saw them like kind of getting ready up on stage, it's like, yeah, like they've been with Nintendo for so long, but also like they've never done like an event like this. And they even started off like saying that like one of them, I guess, oh God, where was he from? Was he from, I guess, Kyoto? And he said that like he was like rehearsing his lines because he's never done a Nintendo Direct before. And he was like, I have my lines so like memorized and so perfect of how I want to say it. And he got there and he was recording, and they were like, hey, could you like tone down your regional dialect a little bit? Like, because like we need you to sound like more kind of universally appealing. So he had like all of his lines memorized, and then he had to re-say them or repeat them while also toning down his accent, I guess.
Oh my gosh.
It was just kind of a funny anecdote for like somebody who's never really done a Nintendo Direct to have like, he was like, yeah, for me, it was the hardest thing to I was the one that gave them the most trouble, was essentially what he was saying. I think it was Dota, the director.
So it's so funny, and I don't know, maybe this isn't how it is in Japan, but at least in the IT shops that I've worked in, most IT people are very shy. And that's actually why people like me who, my value is not coding because I can't code, but I can certainly translate what what business partners wants into like, how do we deliver that as, functional product? And then usually I'm the one that has to like present that, or somebody higher than me has to present something like that. Right. So it's just interesting to see, because like I'll tell you, most IT people that I've worked with, they're like, I don't want to stand in front of people. No way. No, that's like, they're very introverted. They're very shy. Right. So that was very cool.
Yeah. I was happy they got the spotlight.
Yes, for sure. So, well, I guess my first question to you. This is a question now. You can write this down. Yeah. What are your impressions? What were your first impressions of the Switch 2?
The way back, the first impressions back in January when they did like that kind of reveal stream, it's funny because I showed it to my partner. I was like, oh, look, they showed off like the Nintendo Switch 2, and I showed her like the entire trailer, and it was relatively short back then. And her response was, because she's not a gamer whatsoever, she was like, okay, so it's bigger? And that was it. And I'm like, yeah, I guess that kind of is the big takeaway from this reveal trailer. Yeah. And obviously, like, once you delved a little bit deeper, there was the mouse controls and everything that they teased in that initial trailer, and then they eventually confirmed in this Switch 2 Direct. I was ready to be like, okay, well, like, what are the big hooks for this console? And I think that my key takeaway is that the big hooks for any Nintendo console, it doesn't need to be like a gimmick or anything like that. What it needs to be is the big hook of Nintendo consoles are the Nintendo games. Because like that is the ace in the hole that Nintendo will always have, right? They have the best development teams of all time. The best developer of all time, Nintendo, is exclusive to Nintendo platforms, right? So there's no danger in that changing ever. I mean, like, it's like, remember in like the Wii U era, people were like, oh, well, maybe they should just put Mario on Xbox. Yeah. And because like Nintendo had one bad console. Yeah. So, I think that was my key takeaway, was that like, as long as Nintendo is going to continue developing the games that they create and like, not like just making them as good as they have been in the Switch 1 era, I am going to be on board. I'm going to be along for that ride for as long as I'm alive. But thankfully we don't have to just rely only on those games, because the Switch 2 seems like a very solid piece of hardware. It is bigger, it's more comfortable in your hands. The screen is really great. The mouse controls feel really fun, and the 4 games that I tried them out on, them out on Dragon Drive, Civ 7, Super Mario Party Jamboree, and Metroid Prime 4. Okay. And the way it works is phenomenal in that, like, you don't have to go into any menus, at least for the games that I checked them out. You could be playing with your Joy-Cons, and then on a whim, turn it sideways, put it on the table, and suddenly it's mouse controls. It like just activates. So there's like crazy. There's no like, all right, I'm playing Metroid Prime 4 in standard controls. Yeah. I want to play mouse controls. All right, let me hit pause. Let me go into the options. Let me scroll to controls, switch over to mouse controls. Let me try that. Oh, I don't like it. Let me go back. So let me hit pause. Go. No, it's just instantaneous. And the same thing for Dragon Drive. Like, you're doing the wheelchair motion, and then you just raise your hands up. You can call for the ball by waving your hands in the air, or if you have the ball, you're rolling, and then like you go to shoot, all you have to do is lift your right hand up. I'm assuming it works left-handed as well if you're a lefty, and just flick your wrist like a basketball shot motion, and then that's how you shoot. It's just seamless. And that was really impressive to me. Not to mention, playing Metroid Prime 4, they had 2 different kind of like performance modes. There was the 1080, or I guess it was 4K at 60 frames per second, or 1080p at 120 frames per second. And seeing Metroid Prime 4 in 120 frames per second, even in 1080p, which I still contend is fine, I honestly, I think HDR is the bigger impact to how a game looks, and frame rate is a bigger impact than going from 1080p to 4K. And I love my 4K TVs, and like the fact that my PS5 and my Xbox Series X can get 4K and all that stuff. But like, the HDR on like Mario Kart World blew me out of the water. It looks Mario Kart's already such a vibrant game, and to add HDR and really, really, really smooth frame rate, it's fantastic. And then adding all the other elements into it, I think just makes it a really promising piece of hardware that I think that it's going to do wonders for. I mean, we're already seeing it with that reveal, right? Where we had like Cyberpunk, and we had Final Fantasy VII Remake, and Street Fighter 6, and Civ 7. I mean, Civ 7's already on Switch, but a better version of Civ 7. Yakuza 0. Like, all these games are being brought over, and it's like, all right, well, it used to be that like, oh, well, if a game is coming to Switch 1, it is going to be kind of the worst version of that game. And that still might be the case. Like, I know Cyberpunk 2077 is not as good looking as the PS5 version, but it's not like dramatically so. It's not like dramatically worse than it's like, it's better than a PS4 version of Cyberpunk, but it's worse than the PS5 version. But you can't take the PS5 version wherever you want, right? You can't just like pick it up and be like, oh, suddenly it's handheld. Having that on the go is going to be incredible. But like the key hope for me, in addition to like, all right, well, all these games that I loved, like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, are now playing incredibly well, and smooth frame rates and better resolution. All these new Nintendo games are going to look and play incredible. But also these third-party games are going to be able to come over and have be much closer and much more in line with the other versions, the superior versions. Like, we've made the joke at Game Informer of like, when they announced Stray was coming to Switch, it's like, hey, you can now get the worst version of Stray for your Nintendo Switch. And then like when Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown came out last year, it was like, wow, the Switch has an exclusive content, loading screens. And it's like, it's nice that like, hopefully that won't be the case, at least as blatantly as it has been.
Yeah. One thing I thought was interesting, and I think this has to be the only time that they ever have done this. This is the first time they used a number in their system, right? So like
3DS, I guess technically, but
okay, that
fair, doesn't count because DS was not the third or the second DS. So
yeah. I guess, I mean, they did use DS though in it, right? So like but like the Switch 2, and I just thought that was interesting because I feel like, does that mean we're gonna eventually get a Switch 3 and a Switch 4? Like, are they gonna follow the patterns of, well, I don't want to say Xbox because they went backwards and now they're doing letters. Who knows what they're doing? But like Sony, where they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just an interesting thought around. Is this a trend we're gonna see with them, or is this just because Switch was so popular? Calling a Switch 2 is better than calling it like Switch U or something,
Yeah, and I mean, I think they've done a lot of kind of direct successors in their history, right? We went from like Nintendo Entertainment System to Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and the core hook there was like, it is more powerful. It's 16-bit graphics and more buttons on the controller and stuff like that. And then, we got the Nintendo 64 and then the GameCube. Obviously, went from cartridge to discs. That opened up certain possibilities. But it was like, all in all, it was an evolution of what the N64 offered. And same thing was happening in the handheld. We went from Game Boy to Game Boy Color to Game Boy Advance, and DS to 3DS. And you could say that the Wii to the Wii U was a little bit of a departure because it added the touchpad or the gamepad, and but it was still a lot of the same guts were in the Wii U as were in the Wii. But really what that served to be was a bridge from the Wii to the Switch, because, we got the gamepad, which everybody was like, oh, I wish I could take this anywhere. And then Nintendo was like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do that. So I mean, I think this might just be a part of like their wider trend where they create a system and then they iterate on what worked from that and make it better. And I think that's what they're doing here. But I wouldn't, at that same time, be surprised if they continued to like if the Switch 2 is even something approximating as successful as the Switch 1, they might just take that as like, hey, people want a hybrid console. What if we did that and then added more like gimmicks to that? And it's not necessarily like a massive reinvention the way like GameCube to Wii was, where it's like an entirely new control scheme. But like, they could continue on with this hybrid console style for a long time. But also, like, look at how long the Switch 1 was the flagship system for Nintendo, like 8+ years.
Yeah.
If that is how long the Switch 2 lasts, then, we might have an entirely different kind of technology that Nintendo is investigating. And, I saw, I think it was Kit and Krista on their podcast, kind of brought up like a sobering reality that this is likely the final system that we will have Shigeru Miyamoto working on it, because he's probably fewer than 8 years away from retirement.
Yeah.
And probably alongside him will be Takashi Tezuka, who is the heart of kind of the Mario franchise at this point. So it's kind of wild to think about that, but at the same time, like, how involved are they with the design of the consoles at this point in their careers? Right. Miyamoto seems like he's off and working more on like kind of like the non-gaming properties for Nintendo, whether it's like the Lego stuff or the theme parks or the movies. Like, he seems like he's more interested in doing that, and then also maybe consulting a little bit on the games. I could be completely off on that, but that's what, from my sense in when I got to meet with him in Koji Kondo around the Mario movie, he seemed extremely enthusiastic about those types of opportunities. The biggest smile I got out of him was when I mentioned the Legos. And like he just like lit up when I mentioned the Legos.
Really?
And, I think that he is kind of like in a phase in his career where he's like, I worked on games for like 45 years. I can move away and do some other stuff with my time now.
Yeah. I never, I mean, that makes sense. I just never really thought of it that way. And I think one thing that Nintendo does really well, though, is establish like what the identity is with the Nintendo, right? And I think just that through line has made them who they are today. And I think that's while like it's sad to see some of these pioneers and the people that were like revolutionary for Nintendo, but it's also exciting to think who else is going to be able to take that tradition and like run with it, right? So
and I mean, Nintendo's done such a great job with mentoring its up and coming folks, like and when I was doing the Mario Wonder cover story for Game Informer, I got to meet with Takashi Tezuka and Shiro Mori, and you sit there and you're like, oh, like this guy, like, you look at Takashi Tezuka, he's been there since the early 80s, I think maybe even like 79 or something like that. So he's been around forever. And then you look at Shiro Mori and you're like, oh, he's like one of the young guys. He's like the up and comer. And you talk to him and you look him up and you're like, oh, he's been here since like 2002. He's been with Nintendo for like 23 years. It's like, no, he's not an up and coming. It's the same thing with like, Hidemaru Fujibayashi. He was working on Game Boy Advance games for like, and it's like, no, he's been around for over 2 decades. And now like, he's just now kind of stepping into the spotlight, with Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, with him being the director of those games. But like when you look at him compared to like Eiji Aonuma, it's like, oh, well, Eiji Aonuma's been there for like 30 plus years. Hidemaru Fujibayashi's only been there for 20 plus years. It's like wild how they have like, and like, they're all mentoring the people below them. So like having somebody like Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka and Eiji Aonuma at the top of these structures, identifying the key talent and bringing them up, and then like, establishing them as kind of the product owners or franchise owners. It really, I mean, and Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka did the same thing with Eiji Aonuma back in the 90s, right? So like it has kind of been like Nintendo's DNA to do that. And also like Square Enix has done a great job of that as well. Like Tetsuya Nomura and Yoshinori Kitase and all those, Motomo Toriyama, they have been mentoring the likes of like Teruki Endo, who is the combat designer on Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy, and then Naoki Hamaguchi, who's a lot younger than any of those other guys. He also kind of was brought up through those folks like Nomura, Toriyama, and Kitase. So I think that it might also be the longevity of a lot of these Japanese companies that a lot of these developers, they will join these companies and they will just stay there. Even talking to Takashi Iizuka, the head of Sonic team, his first thing was doing debug on Sonic 2 after he joined Sega. And then he was like a designer on Sonic 3. And now it's just like, look at him now. He's been 33 years later, he is now, in charge of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was, as you were saying that, it dawned on me like how uncommon that is nowadays.
Especially in the US.
At least in the US, for sure. Right. Like, I think if people are there for 20 years, you're like, whoa, that's a really long time. Right. And I don't know what that means. Like, I mean, I don't know if that says about us or what, but I don't know. I mean, but it's an interesting perspective and viewpoint for sure. So like, I just thought those, when you were saying that, I was like, yeah, that's so different than what it is here in the US. So
yeah. And the problem is here, we don't value loyalty, unfortunately, it either through the companies just constantly laying off people, or people just being like, oh, well, you're not giving me raises like commensurate to what I'm worth. Like, I've been at this company for 10 years and you're not giving me like the significant like upgrade that I could get. I could like go somewhere else and like double my salary. And that's kind of like the mindset that we get here, because that's just the way our system works here in the States. And I'm assuming in other Western countries as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Super exciting, super fun stuff to think about. Not at all depressing.
Not at all depressing. So one of the things that I know people are saying, and I've heard you say this before, that it's not a concern for you, but I have to ask it anyway, because it's a question that people have been saying. The system is using, LED versus an OLED. But it seems to me, at least I've listened to your podcast and I've listened to you talk about this. You seem to think that's not a big concern for you, right? Like, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what was noticeable during your time with it, or was it noticeable during your time with it?
Hold on, I just want to make sure. Okay, it is LCD, not LED.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just wanted to make sure.
Sorry.
So, yeah, I mean, I only played a select few games in handheld mode. Most of my demos were up on the screen. The longest time that I had with handheld mode was Mario Kart World, where just did one race in handheld mode, and it looks great. The HDR, the smooth frame rate, that really does make a huge difference. And we did ask that question to those three guys who were there on behalf of the Switch 2 design team. Yeah. They said basically, and I'm sure you heard this on my podcast if you listen to it, where they were like, yeah, like if it would be insufficient if we were taking the technology that existed for the Switch 1 and put it on the Switch 2, but that's not what they're doing. They're not taking all right, we're just going to cut a bigger piece of the LCD and throw it on the Switch 2, and it's just like our leftover Switch 1 stuff. It's like they were like, no, we looked into the cost effectiveness. We looked into the technology that has progressed in LCD technology over the past 8 years, and we think it's the best call. And I mean, I don't think that they would be out of line to release an OLED somewhere down the line, because OLED has also made strides in becoming, better screens and everything like that. But in terms of trying to keep the cost down as much as possible and also delivering a terrific screen, it seems like they made the right call, because the screen looked fantastic. The colors really popped. It was very bright. I didn't have my Switch 1 with me to compare, but going back to it, it's like, oh boy, this this is a step down from the Switch 2 for sure. So
was it hard to go back? Was it hard to go back to your Switch 1 a little bit?
A little bit, yeah, because it also doesn't feel as good in my hands. It doesn't look as good. The frame rate is not great at this juncture for any relatively new game.
Yeah.
So it's definitely going to be a step up if you've been playing a lot of Switch 1.
Okay. Well, that leads to my next question. My concern with this, and maybe it's not a big concern, but the Switch 1 does not feel well in my hands. It's just so flat. It doesn't feel good. Does this feel more comfortable to you when you're playing it in handheld? I know you didn't have a whole lot of time with it, but did it feel more comfortable?
I thought it felt great.
Yeah.
It is the same thickness as the Switch One, so like if that has been a problem for you, then it might not be much better. I vastly prefer the Switch One's thickness to that of like the Steam Deck, which
really
I have stopped bringing my Steam Deck on trips because it just takes up so much space in my backpack.
Yeah.
I did recently buy a slimline case that the good folks over at Axe of the Blood God recommended to me when I was on their show recently. So I am excited. I have a trip coming up here in May, early May, that I'm gonna bring my Steam Deck and see if it travels a bit better now that I bought this slimline case off Amazon. But yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest improvement is not when you're playing in handheld mode, but when you turn the Joy-Con sideways. Because I've hated playing any game on Switch One with the Joy-Con sideways, and like if you don't put the strap like thing on that like makes it so the buttons stick out, the SL and SR buttons, basically like the shoulder buttons on the sideways Joy-Con, it is just impossible to use those in an effective way. Now they stick out a little bit. They feel like actual buttons. The controller being bigger feels better in my adult hands. It's not like something that I feel like I'm kind of like cramping up trying to use. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, it does feel substantially better in my hands.
Perfect.
And also the Pro controller feels great. It feels largely the same as the Switch One Pro controller, but it has that game chat button, and it also has back paddles, basically, like back buttons that you can map to be whatever you want. Like I usually do it left back if I'm playing like a shooter, like left back button is usually reload and right back button is jump, and that works super well for me.
Nice. You mentioned the mouse, and you said how awesome it is that you can just unhook it and start playing with the mouse. Does it feel intuitive when you're playing games with it then too? And also the size, like, because for me, like even this mouse that I have, I know listeners can't really see this, but this mouse even feels small for me, right? Maybe it's because I have, big hands or something. I don't know. But I just showed you my hands. Look at my hands; they're huge. But does it feel small? Does these feel small in your hands? Because for me, that would feel like a cramp up if I played too much.
I didn't have extended time with it, so I can't tell you about like long term. But like as somebody who has had like cramps playing like PS Vita, for example, like I never gelled with the form factor of the Vita, and even the 3DS. It wasn't until like the 3DS XL that like I really started like, okay, I like the 3DS form factor. I didn't have any problems with the mouse. Like yes, it's very thin because it is still that Joy-Con thickness, which is the same thickness as the Joy-Con you're going to get on Switch 1 and Switch 2. But like, have your finger rests naturally on the shoulder button that when it's turned regularly, it turns into like the left click of your mouse. And then if you just put your middle finger on the kind of trigger, it doesn't feel quite as intuitive as like having like a right click on an actual mouse, but it does feel comfortable and it feels intuitive. Reaching the other buttons, not so much, but I know that people will be able to do other things with those buttons if they so choose. Like developers will be able to.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense for games like Civ 7. And I was like, yeah, I could see that. It's been such a long time, Brian, since I've played like shooter games with a mouse. Like even just watching, Prime, like Metroid Prime 4, I was just like, I'm not sure if I'll ever use it. Maybe, but yeah, it's just been nowadays. Like people are like, I prefer a keyboard. I'm like, I can't play keyboard or mouse anymore. I just can't. I used to, but not anymore. So,
well, the thing that I really came away like excited about is, whenever there's like a game that is created specifically for PC, and it's like, all right, mouse and keyboard controls, this would be really difficult to translate to a controller.
Yeah.
You can probably get a better translation of that or transposition of that with the Switch 2, because I was talking to the Firaxis people behind Civ 7, and one of the guys was like, oh yeah, like, basically the left Joy-Con is the WASD, so like you're doing all like the stuff you need to do, and then like the buttons can be other things. And then the right Joy-Con, you can either have that be like, analog stick control, or you can flip it down, do the mouse, and then you're just controlling it like it's a PC. So you have the WASD in your left Joy-Con, just use the joystick for that. Or you can use the mouse control for actually like going around it seems like the City Skylines is a game that I love playing. And I think that the Colossal Order, the developer, did a fantastic job of translating those controls, those very intricate controls, to gamepad controls for the Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch versions of those games. But that's never my preferred way to play. My preferred way to play is always going to be mouse and keyboard. For simulation games, strategy games, I will usually prefer mouse and keyboard, and that's like the only genre for me that I will prefer that.
Yes.
I could see myself, like, if they put out City Skylines 2 on Switch 2, I think that would be a huge hit, because you can use the mouse and kind of a pseudo keyboard and that left Joy-Con to do a lot of the stuff and like really streamline it for a probably the best console version.
Yeah. And I think one thing that it has over a mouse or traditional mouse too, right, is the fact that it has the gyro in it. Like, there's so many cool things they could do with that would just bypass anything that you can do on PC with a mouse and keyboard. So that's one thing that kind of excites me about using the mouse, where Nintendo could do really cool things with that.
Oh, definitely. And they will too, because they're so creative. Like, that's when it comes to like Mario Kart World, and I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding that game, especially with its price tag and everything. Like, I'm excited for like Knockout Tour mode, where it's like, kind of like an elimination race. I'm excited for the Grand Prix, where you're driving between tracks to get there.
It's so cool.
And the free roam, I think, is what I'm most intrigued by, because that Mario Kart team is so creative. I'm excited to see what they can do with like creating a compelling and interesting to explore open world, especially in a post Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom world, where it's like, okay, Nintendo has already shown they have the mastery of a very specific kind of open world. Could they translate some of that expertise to a Mario Kart game? Like, the stuff that I saw in my like limited time doing free roam didn't feel like it was the most rewarding exploration, but it was very, very limited to like the amount of space and time that I had. I could see it being like a really cool open world to explore. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that they really are flexing their creative muscles for Mario Kart World's open world.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and this is recorded before the Direct, so we should like preface that, right? But it'll be interesting to see, because with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, of all the different races, including like Hyrule and Animal Crossing, and even the Squid. I don't know. Did the Squids have Splatoon have levels? I don't know if they had levels.
Splatoon had battle mode levels.
Oh, okay.
Or at least one battle, which makes sense, right? Because that's very much, the entire game is battle mode, basically.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if they do something like that, or how they could do something like that in this Mario world, where the Mario Kart world, where it feels like the world's already there. Can you add to it? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see like how they might translate that, if they can translate that. So
yeah, very exciting to see what they're cooking. Unfortunately, we're recording this, like you said, before the Mario Kart World Direct, so maybe this is the worst Direct of all time, and we're all pitchforks and torches and everything, but I'm hoping that it's going to be a good Direct.
Me too. One thing I was curious about, did you notice any changes to the UI or OS? Because right now, I will say this, Nintendo Switch is probably the most boring OS system and the UI system I've ever experienced with Nintendo, at least modern Nintendo consoles. Like, did they do anything with that at all?
I honestly don't know, because everything that we got to was preloaded up, right?
Okay.
Like, we would get to the Mario Kart station, and they would have Mario Kart's like start screen there. The only UI elements that we really saw were the game chat screens, where it was like they'd push the button and it's like, okay, you can like invite friends to join your game chat or whatever, right? Like, so that was really the extent of the UI that I got to see. That said, I do know that they kind of rebuilt the entire system from the ground up, essentially. And somebody asked about eShop, and they did. One of them was like, "Oh, don't even get me started on this, because like I have so many problems with the current eShop. So I'm hoping that means they have like made drastic improvements to the eShop, because I went to go download a game yesterday off the eShop. It is running on like it's probably a 30-year-old server. Somebody, I forget who it was, one of the listeners of All Things Nintendo wrote in asking if, like, will the eShop be run on something better than Shigeru Miyamoto's 35-year-old cigarette-stained yellow desktop PC? And it's like, man, it really does feel like it's running off something like that, because it chugs, and it's like I'm just trying to load like the game page.
Yeah.
And I'm connected. I'm hardwired in. I bought like a USB adapter.
Oh no.
So it's not my internet. My internet's giving me gigabit connection.
Yeah.
And it's still taking like, a full 10 to 20 seconds to load a game's like store page.
Yeah, and it's just weird to me because the 3DS, I felt like actually was a pretty cool UI and operating system. They did some pretty cool stuff with the 3DS, and I was expecting they'll just make that even better on the Switch, and I was very disappointed when they didn't. So
I think the only thing that we've learned so far is there's not going to be music playing on the home screen. I think that was something that came out, but yeah, I don't think we've learned a whole lot. I would love to see the return of themes or custom sorting beyond just like the kind of bare bones group functionality that we have now, where it's like, okay, cool, I put all the Mario games in a group.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Like, I want to see like more customization, but I don't know if Nintendo's really prioritizing that, unfortunately.
Yeah. I spent a lot of, well, I shouldn't say a lot of money, but I did spend money on my 3DS and customization and
same.
having because it was cool. It was cool.
I loved having like the SNES theme, or like there was like a Mario anniversary theme I think they put out at some point. That was a lot of fun.
Yes, I have that one. I have a Donkey Kong one, and I think I have a Zelda one.
I have a Zelda
one
for sure. I know that one.
It's just cool.
I think I bought that one, or I don't know if you bought that one, or if that was one of like the preloaded, because I think they gave you a few preloaded ones, and I think I bought that because I replaced my 3DS XL with like the Link Between Worlds 3DS, like the gold colored one.
Yeah.
And it I was like, okay, well, I need to have a Zelda theme for my Zelda 3DS.
Yes. Did you also remember, sorry, not to dwell too much on that, but there was also this game where you could like, I don't remember what it was, but you had like, there was like a crane game, and you can get things, and then you could like put it on your Switch on like the UI. Like you would get like these little things that could be like maybe something from Zelda or something from Donkey Kong. I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't like this crane
Nintendo
game.
Switch 2 Welcome Tour, was it? Like, that's the only thing I can think of that like sounds like what you're describing.
Oh no, I mean that was on the 3DS.
Badge Arcade. What was
Badge Arcade? Yes, that's what I hope they come up with, something like the Badge Arcade for the Switch, because that was pretty cool. Like I also spent money on that, like real money on that, because I was like, oh, this is cool. No, the Welcome Tour. No, just. Did you play that? Did you get to play that at all?
I did, and I played like the UFO dodging, or the UFO where you're dodging like incoming meteors, and like sometimes you have to collect stars. There was a game where you put the mouse on the table, and there was like a frequency line like on the screen.
Yeah.
And you just had to detect where the mouse vibrated the most, like using the HD rumble, like how hard, like the hardest it was vibrating, and you had to click and say like, here's where I think it's vibrating the most, and it would tell you actually it's here, and it's like, okay. That's where I was.
That was a lot of fun, huh?
I was like, all right, I think it's here, and I clicked it, and it's like, actually it's here, and I just went, huh. I mean, it's fun for what it is, but at the same time, it's like, this should be a pack-in thing. This is 100%. A glorified instruction manual meets a tech demo. Right? They're like, hey, did you know that HD Rumble makes your controllers rumble real good? And I'm like, I did.
My gosh, that is my. So I will. When I was watching the stream of that, and it was like, and then you can take a quiz. And I was like, why would anybody want to take a quiz on this? Nobody wants to go through a quiz. Like, that is not fun for anybody.
No, I posited this, I think, on All Things Nintendo, where it was like, if Nintendo does in fact have to raise the price, because of these stupid tariffs. I could see a way that they kind of lessen the blow or lighten the blow by saying like, hey, if you buy it before this date, we'll give you a free download code for Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour and like, a 20% off coupon for like a future game or something like that. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. Like there's got to be something there, or like maybe they already kind of shot themselves in the foot, because the way that they combated the underwhelming launch of the 3DS was like, oh, the Nintendo Ambassador Program, it'll give you some Game Boy Advance games. It's like, we already have those.
Yes.
So I mean, maybe they could just be like, all right, well, here's we Nintendo Switch Online catalog for anybody who buys it before this date, and maybe that would help. I don't know. But they're trying to do the GameCube thing so aggressively right now, so I don't think they'd want to overshadow that with another platform.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, I think that's the best route for them, is like to just give Switch 2 Welcome Tour away to everybody who buys it before like maybe the end of 2025 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then like, I don't know, maybe some sort of coupon, or I don't know if they're going to start a new rewards program since they're phasing out the gold points on the eShop.
Yeah.
There's got to be some way that they can lessen the blow, if they even care to, because they might just be like, we sold 155 million units on Switch 1. We're probably going to do pretty okay launching with a Mario Kart game, even if it is $80.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's actually leads me to my next question here. Your thoughts on the price. Does it feel justified based on what you experienced? And my biggest concern is if there is impact from the tariffs on the final price, do you think it will affect the overall success of the Switch 2 launch?
I mean, I think it's going to, no matter what. Like, $450 in 2025 feels a bit more fair than it would have in 2017. Like 2017, $300. Even then, $300 felt a little bit cheap, right? Like, and I'm not saying cheap in a bad way. I'm saying cheap in like it was a good value to get your Switch 1 for that price.
Right.
I think that $450 then would have been like, oh, wow, this is really expensive. Nowadays, I mean, and it sucks because it's not really Nintendo's fault that everything costs more. It's, everything else that is causing everything to cost more. And the fact that, like, most people are not getting paid more than, like, in keeping pace with that increased cost of living, that is the key problem that I think that a lot of people are going to have to reckon with. Because I mean, $450 is a lot of money, even if it, is kind of keeping pace with the way that everything else is costing since 2017.
Yeah.
The $80 games, that's kind of a more concerning thing, because a $450 purchase, if that is the only time you're going to buy a Switch 2 for the next, 6 to 8 years, you can bite the bullet. I mean, I'm not saying I'm trying to be flippant about it, but like I can feel more comfortable biting the bullet on that.
Yeah.
If they're like, okay, well, every AAA Nintendo developed game is going to be $80 from here on out. Like, Mario Kart World is $80. Say Donkey Kong Bonanza. I don't know if we've gotten a price on that yet, but if it's $80, and that's like, like that could be a problem, because if Nintendo proves that people will still buy these games, that like 2K is going to be right behind them. Where there's already concerns that people are saying that like Take-Two might just charge $100 for GTA 6.
Yes.
And we saw that, like, once NBA 2K started selling back in 2020 for $70, everybody else was kind of like, oh, maybe we should try that. And a lot of AAA games now sell for $70. And Nintendo keeps trotting out the kind of like, oh, well, we price our games based on the value that we think they deliver, which I don't know if you can ever really trust that. And the reason for that is because Donkey Kong Country Returns HD was $60, I think.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is, I mean, Nintendo never puts their games on sale. Like Breath of the Wild, I'm pretty sure if you looked it up, is still going to be $60. But like, and Tears of the Kingdom still $70. The problem is that like a game like that should not cost that much money still after all this time. Like Ubisoft games used to go on sale after like 1 week.
Yes, I know.
Like I remember when, what was it? Assassin's Creed Revelations came out November 15th, 2011. And I think I got it 2 weeks later on Black Friday for like $20. And it's like, wow, that is couldn't be Nintendo.
Yeah.
So like that's my bigger concern is that these $80 price points are going to stick not only for Nintendo but expand out to the rest of the industry. And yeah, I mean, things cost more now, so it makes sense, but it doesn't lighten the blow that like, the majority of people, especially in America, are not getting paid more. So that's why it's going to sting extra hard. And I have talked to people who are like, we have a lot of kids. They all want their own Switch 2. They all have their own Switch 1s. They all want their own Switch 2s, but at $450 a pop, and if it goes up, like definitely not. But like at $450 a pop, we really have to be like judicious about like, all right, we can get 2, and that way like you can play with each other, but you're all gonna have to share, and then maybe down the line eventually get one for everybody. But like it is going to be one of those things where it's like that is that's a 50% increase from the Switch 1 when it launched, which, is not insignificant.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think this will be a really good test, especially if the tariffs impact the price. It'll be a really good test to see brand loyalty. Like how can brand loyalty help Nintendo out through this situation. And listeners, if you haven't heard it, I actually had a friend of mine who's an economist on the show. We talked about tariffs, and just like the impact of what it could have on the gaming industry, right? And one thing that I didn't even think of, because like tariffs are, a tax on imports, but products already here, they're going to raise the price on that too if they have to, right? Because like otherwise it's not fair to those that can't get a Switch at launch. It's like, oh, sorry, now you got to pay more. And my bigger concern is that once the price goes up, it's really hard for that to come back down. Even if the tariffs are lifted, if they're seeing consoles fly out the door, they're not going to bring that price down. They're going to be like, well, I mean, that's what people are willing to pay for it. So
yeah, I mean, value is not determined by the companies; it's determined by the market. If they release the Switch 2 and it's $600 and they're having a hard time moving the units, they will eventually lower the price. Look at the 3DS; they did that. Within a year, they not only lowered the price, but they gave everybody who bought it at that original price the Game Boy Advance library of Virtual Console.
Yeah. So it'll be, I don't know, it'll be an interesting experiment, I guess. I think the difference here too is the fact that it's not just the Switch, but everything's being, this tariff tax, right? Mm-hmm. And what's the first thing that usually gets cut out of people's budget is entertainment. So I don't know. We'll see. Oh yeah. Okay, that was dark. All right.
Hey, we could have gone a lot darker on that one.
We could have. I actually, if you want to hear dark, you should listen to last week's episode. That goes pretty dark. Well, it's not this dark. It's just like the reality of like what that means, right? So
yeah, it's a challenging time economically, and there's a lot of policies being put in place that are going to touch every aspect of your life. Like, my partner, she was in a car accident a few weeks ago. Thankfully, she escaped with no injuries, but her car was totaled. Yeah. And at first, she was like, "All right, well, they're giving me like a good lump sum of money to replace my car." But then suddenly there was like this lightning bolt that hit us both. Like, oh my God, the tariffs! Everything's going to be so much more expensive. So like, whether you're buying a car or whether you're buying like a Nintendo Switch 2. These tariffs are going to impact you, and that's just a reality of the world we live in. I was concerned when I did my episode of All Things Nintendo last week that like people would be like, "Oh, why are you talking about so much politics and like stick to games?" It's like, this is games. Like, we are talking specifically about how the world right now is affecting and impacting. Like when Nintendo comes out specifically and says we have to reevaluate the impact of these tariffs, so we have to delay our pre-orders for the system we just announced, trying to drum up all this hype so you could pre-order it a week later, and now we're delaying that while we assess the impact of these tariffs. You've got to talk about it through that lens because they have officially acknowledged that is the reason.
Right, exactly. And that's exactly why I had that episode too, is because of that same reason. So to wrap things up, if you could describe the Switch 2 in one word, what would it be?
I mean, there's two that I'm bouncing between. One is let's just go with this one, polarized.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that Direct was a super fun celebration of all the games that we are going to be playing over the next few months. The system itself looks and feels and plays really great, but there's all this outside stuff. The Switch 2 welcome tour being, a paid piece of software, which, by the way, being in the room with probably 50 members of the media, and also Doug Bowser sitting 2 rows behind me, when they said that and the room burst into laughter, it was kind of awkward. Like, oh boy. But I mean, hey, like, I guess kind of message sent a little bit, because we weren't alone in that. Turns out a lot of people were feeling that way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have this incredible looking console. Obviously, as I talked about at the top of the show, this incredible library of games that is promised, and we probably don't even know 10% of the games that Nintendo is working on right now and will probably announce over the next several months. So that all is so exciting. And also, anytime Nintendo puts out a new system, even the Wii U's of the world feel like an event. I mean, I flew to New York, I took a bus to New York for the Wii U launch. That was the first time I ever met Reggie, was at the Wii U launch at Nintendo New York.
That's awesome.
And I got to watch the first Wii U get sold in the US. And then, like, it was a super celebratory air. And then, like, a few weeks later, it's like, not so celebratory. But, like, it's still an event when Nintendo releases either a console, a really, like, anticipated game. Like, all of that is super exciting. Like, I mean, I have a weekly podcast dedicated to this company. So obviously I'm stoked for that. But there's a bunch of negative stuff, both, unforced errors like Nintendo Switch World Tour or Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. I keep saying World Tour. Welcome Tour being a paid piece of software, the Mario Kart 8 or Mario Kart World price. Stuff like that feels like an unforced error. And then obviously the world events with the tariffs and the state of the economy and everything like that, that all kind of combines to almost balance out the excitement with a little bit of either anxiety or frustration. Like, we know that Nintendo, like, marches to the beat of its own drums. I always say on all things Nintendo, like, try to predict Nintendo at your own folly, more or less, because, like, it is a fool's errand to try to say what Nintendo is going to do next. Like, how long have we been saying they're going to put Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD on Switch any day now?
Yeah, exactly.
And, here we are. Well, we're getting Wind Waker finally, but it's the GameCube version.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, how long were we saying, the Switch Pro, it's going to be announced this year, and it never happened. That's why I never bought a Switch OLED, because the Switch Pro was what I was holding out for. And then we got like, now we're so close to the Switch 2, I'm just going to hold off for that. But like, there's such greatness in that reveal and my first impressions. And then it's kind of tempered with this other side of the equation. And I think we're going to get to a point where we're going to all have to make a decision for ourselves of like, all right, how excited are we really for this? Is this like a must-have day one purchase? For me, it is, not only for professional reasons, but also personal reasons. Like, Mario Kart's one of the most important franchises in my life. So of course I'm going to do everything I can in my power to have that in my house June 5th, if not sooner, if I'm lucky enough to be able to review it ahead of time. Like, I'm going to, jump over chairs to try to get a Switch 2 at launch. So I think everybody else is going to have to make that calculation of like, is $450 plus $80 plus whatever it costs for a Pro controller, whatever it costs for a camera, like all these things, like, is it worth it to drop, say, like $650 or in that ballpark for the stuff that you were going to want in order to get the full Nintendo Switch 2 experience? And I mean, once you add it all up like that, it is a bitter pill to swallow. But, I think that overall I'm feeling positive, and it's just unfortunate there are these negatives, and like the messaging confusion as well is another problem that has been happening with Nintendo over the past 2 weeks. And I would love to see it resolve itself so we can all just go back to like how it was feeling immediately after that direct, and we're all just like super stoked before all this like, you know, kind of confusion and murkiness and like just uncertainty about like when we're even going to be able to pre-order this thing emerged. I want to get back to that point where we're just super excited.
Yeah, I agree. That's where I'm at too. Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining me and talking about Nintendo Switch 2. This was really fun for me to hear your perspective and having you on the show talk about your firsthand perspective. So thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join me and talk about that.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's always great chatting with you, Roger, and I'll come back anytime.
Yay! Before you go, why don't you tell people how they can follow you on social media?
Sure, you can find me on social media. I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram at Brian P. Shea. And then you can listen to the All Things Nintendo podcast wherever you get your podcast. There's also a video version on YouTube. And then always go to GameInformer.com. Sign up for an account. That is the best way to get notified when we are going to be taking things to the next level, which we are putting into place now. So go ahead and sign up for an account, GameInformer.com, and then obviously you can find all of my writing there as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm very excited about that. Listeners, I'll put a link in our show notes for all of that. And make sure to subscribe and follow and give Brian a review as well, because that helps with our podcast. Give us a review as well, because we want to hear what you have to say about the show. Until next week, everyone, stay safe and game on. Bye.